Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Scott Winton, Athletic Director at Livingston High School in the Central Valley of California. Coach, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Do me a favor and take us through your background. I know you've been at the school for quite some time. Obviously, you are the co-lead in the district at the AD level, so that takes a little social capital. But how did we get that far along the journey?
Third generation graduate of Livingston High. Both sets of grandparents went to Livingston back in the 1930s. Both parents, myself, my brother. Most recently, all three of my kids went through Livingston High School.
So what you're really saying is they built a invisible fence around Livingston and no one's allowed to leave.
Yeah, other you go to college, you got to come back. Yeah, no. But came back from a coaching background. My dad was a head basketball coach here in the late 70s, early 80s. He also served as the athletic director for a number of years here. My brother's been the head baseball coach here for 30. Daughter finished her basketball playing career. She's now coaching. She's coaching at Bethesda Junior College, coaching hoops. Both my sons are still playing, but I know that when they're done, they'll probably get back into the coaching gigs. Even though I'm not currently coaching, when we get around the dinner table, we talk coaching all the time. Just my background as a player, I played 3 sports at Livingston, played for some great coaches here, Len Johnston in football, Angelo Naldi in basketball, and Bobby Johnson in baseball. After graduating from Livingston, I had the chance to go to UC Davis right out of high school. I was recruited by Ralph Rago, just an old school baseball guy. And towards the end of that process, I decided that I was going to go the JC route just because I thought I'd have a better chance of playing a little bit more. And so I ended up going to Merced College and playing for Chris Pedretti, legendary community college baseball coach. And really thinking back on my development as a player and also as a coach, those 2 years at Merced were really foundational for just figuring out, okay, how am I going to do this as a player? And then also eye-opening in terms of what kind of coach I wanted to be. Coach Pedretti at that time had just a bunch of really good baseball guys in that program. Butch Hughes was around. I'm not being a baseball guy if you know some of these names, but Butch Hughes was around. Len Cicada was a former Major League Baseball player, was like Cal Ripken's second baseman in the 1982 or 83 World Series. He was around every single day, hitting gurus, Glenn Nobby, and just a really good group of guys that were there that was really foundational for figuring out how to be a player. Len Cicada, seriously, he would just be sitting on home plate on a bucket of balls with a fungo, just waiting for guys to come out of the clubhouse to coach. And didn't matter what, you just, hey, you want to go to the cage, you want to get ground balls. And so me and a buddy of mine, we'd rearrange our class schedule to make sure that we would go out and take advantage of Lenny. And so that was good. In my second year at Merced College, Butch Seifert, who was our offensive coordinator in high school, asked if I wanted to help out coaching football at Livingston. So that was my first official gig as far as coaching freshman and JV football at Livingston in '93. And at that time, I was also coaching for our American Legion baseball program, the Atwater Livingston Yams, sponsored by legendary Sweet Potato Joe Alvarez. So that was a cool thing. After Merced College, I reconnected with Coach Rago and ended up transferring to UC Davis after all to play baseball. Played for legendary UC Davis coach Phil Swimley. At that time, Steve Jones was there, great hitting coach who went on to do some really good things as a head coach. Had great time at Davis, awesome time, 3 years there. After finishing at Davis in '96, I had the chance to go to Europe and play and coach in England. And at that time, there was some good baseball in and around Europe. In England, that wasn't really the case. So like our club team in England was probably the equivalent of JV high school baseball. And so I was going from like my last college at bat at Sunken Diamond, hitting 4 for UC Davis against Stanford, till 2 weeks later playing in the rain in Northern England, where we literally set up our whole entire field, backstop included. And what are we doing here? But great, awesome experience. Through that experience, I got connected with Major League Baseball International, and then ended up going back over to Europe in '97 and '98 as a MLBI envoy coach. And basically what I would do is I would take a taxi to a grammar school and teach baseball as a PE lesson to like 3rd through 8th graders. And that was basically, got the connection. Ralph Rago at Davis, he took over as the Great Britain's national coach. So I was living with him and he was putting me up, and it was a really cool experience. My first ever experience coaching in England. Coach Rago, a couple of days after the jet lag wears off, he takes me to coach to do like a lesson for these 10, 11-year-old boys and girls. And so it's 20 minutes and give my baseball 101, and we're going to get up and we're going to start taking batting practice. And I'm kind of going through it. I'm saying, okay, I'm going to be here pitching, and Johnny, you're on deck. Susie, you're in the hole, and Billy, you're going to hit. And then everybody else just go out in the outfield and shag. And so this is pre Austin Powers movie. And so Coach Rago comes running over. Hey man, you can't do that. You can't, like, what are you supposed to say? So I'll look out in the outfield and all these kids are cracking up. And so that was my first day of coaching in England, which was, uh, had to thank Coach Rago for the heads up before I got there. But so 3 summers in England, awesome. Met some great people, got to travel all over Europe coaching junior national team, senior national team. Really made me understand how to coach baseball from a perspective of teaching kids that have zero understanding of the sport. Really helped me when I came back to the States and really breaking down everything into its most fundamental movements. My real job in 97, I got hired at Golden Valley in Merced. It was a 60% teaching assignment. Within the first week of school, I ended up picking up 2 more classes at Merced High. And so I would teach 1A period at GV, first period at GV, drive across town, teach 4th and 5th period at Merced, drive back across town, and then coach at Golden Valley. So I was coaching like receivers and DBs. And then in the spring, I was the head JV baseball coach. After that year, I had the opportunity to either basically do the same assignment at either Merced or Golden Valley. And I'd been in talks with a head baseball coach at Merced High, Lou Souza. Lou was a legendary coach in Merced. He was a summer coach for Merced Legion. So I'd played against his teams, coached against his teams, and just was always really impressed about how prepared and how hard his teams played. And he had talked to me about eventually stepping down and being in a position at Merced to take over as a head coach. Also at that time, I had a chance to coach football with Rob Scheit, who just, I think 2 weeks ago, just picked up his 200th win as a head football coach at Merced High. In 98, I moved over and was a assistant baseball coach, varsity baseball coach, head JV football coach at Merced, stayed there for 17 years. Souza still is an unbelievable mentor. One of the most like traditional, but also out of the box thinkers. And then Coach Scheit was an awesome mentor as a football coach. Also worked for Rob's dad. Tom Scheit was the principal at that time, just an awesome principal. Just really fortunate to be in that situation with such good mentors and good leaders. On the baseball side, I was an assistant coach from 99 to 2001. 2002, Lou and I took over as co-head coaches. And then I took over full-time in 2003 through 2008. Coached in the football program for 6 years before getting into coaching girls golf. Good transition. As life happens, we got married in 2000 to Trish, had twins in 2001, had our 3rd child, Owen, in 2004. And the time commitment and the pool of being a varsity head coach and then also being a dad, that became the realization that you really want to be at your kids' events a little bit more. And in 2008, the head of the AD job opened up at Merced High, and I knew that if I was offered that position, I was going to step down as a baseball coach, and was fortunate to get offered that position. I ended up staying on as a golf coach, but golf coach time compared to head baseball time is apples and oranges. And even AD time at the time, we were part-time ADs and just different time. In 2004, our family moved back to Livingston. We lived down the street from my brother, a couple blocks over from my parents, and then I stayed on as the AD in Merced until the athletic director position at Livingston opened up in 2014 with Angelo Naldi retiring, and with Livingston being in the same district, it was a pretty easy transition from Merced to Livingston. Got here a year before my kids started going through our programs, and all 3 kids played 3 sports for 4 years. I got to see a lot of their games, and it was a really cool thing. 2001, took over with Paul Hogue, the athletic director at Merced, as our district co-lead athletic director. So our district covers the 3 schools in the Merced, Golden Valley, El Cap, and then the two high schools in Atwater and Buhack, and then Livingston. So that's pretty much my journey as a coach, AD. Been a ride.
Love that. And you had some crossover with Marcus. Clearly, if you were at Merced during those times, it was another Aggie.
Absolutely. I can remember seeing him at the knockdown threes when we were there together. And I didn't really know him. I didn't know him from Merced Livingston connection, but then I saw him and then had a lot of got Marcus to coach football at one point at Merced High, which was a stretch for him.
That's awesome. He's the principal now, right?
Yeah.
Kind of move into different roles. All right, let's dive into lots of stuff that I want to talk about. And as you mentioned American Legion baseball at some point in that story.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe, as I was never a baseball guy, but I believe that pre youth sports industrial complex taking over the world, American Legion was what everybody played even once they got into high school, right? That was their off season stuff.
100%. Yeah, 100%. It was a big deal back then.
So how I'm curious what your take is on how aforementioned youth sports industrial complex has affected, impacted, either positively or negatively, that scenario. Because around here, like you used to have your local rec leagues, they're all dead now. Because
Yeah.
essentially, if you're not playing travel, you can't play sports. So, give me
Yeah.
your take on that, and know that I'm a firm believer that club sports are destroying the world. So, feel free to say whatever you want.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but that sweet spot of American Legion baseball in the late 70s, 80s, early 90s, before travel baseball really took off, was awesome. It was like our American Legion was basically, they had a enrollment boundary. So you could capture multiple high schools so long as you didn't go over a certain threshold. And we had 4 or 5 high schools, and it was the best of the best. And you had a tryout, and you were picked, and we had a sponsor that basically picked up the tab for everything, and then we had to go out and sell a couple ads for our game program. But routinely in the Valley, those American Legion games were like, that was the big deal. We played Merced in 1989, and like we sold out the stadium. We ended up playing 18 innings on a Tuesday night and lost 4-2 in 18, and that was full coverage in the Sun Star, the Merced Sun Star, and it's a huge deal. And then towards the end of that, and that's when you started seeing, we had players that I can remember coaching who were opting to go to their travel team to pay to go play somewhere else as opposed to playing for their local team. I don't know, as having my daughter played AAU basketball, played travel soccer, did all that stuff. There's a level for anyone. And the idea that you're playing travel, whatever sport you're playing, doesn't necessarily mean you're playing good competition. We can take a group of kids from Livingston and Delhi and Hillmar and go play travel somewhere in the Bay Area, and we end up playing teams from Las Banas and Modesto, and the level is the level. So I'm not saying it's the end all, but it definitely has hurt. It hurt American Legion. It definitely hurt some rec programs in the area, and it's pay to play. You get what you pay for.
So, as an athletic director and a high school coach, how do you find the sweet spot of being supportive of those endeavors and educating people as to the pitfalls of what has become uh, a mess, as far as I'm concerned?
Yeah, our school we're like 80% free and reduced. I mean, we have parents that they don't have expendable monthly income where they can send their kids. One, we try to provide a comprehensive summer program for all our kids, and the majority of them that can't afford to go play travel basketball or travel baseball. We're actually compensating our coaches to do that in the summer, to provide practice, weight training. We'll do games within our district. That's been big for us. And then our coaches, they do a good job of communicating what's out there. I think you're always going to have some that, hey, I'm playing travel and that's more important than everything in the world. And sometimes it is. We've had some kids who have gone on and done some pretty good things, but for the most part, it's just extended rec, I think.
How have you figured out how to pay your coaches over the summer, right? Because the majority of us grow up in the world of here's your $2,000 stipend to coach the season, and anything else is us being philanthropic. How did you figure that out? And what was the process for getting that done so that the coaches, they're still not making any money, but at least there's a couple more months of gas?
Yeah, no, it was one of those it's probably one of the projects I'm most proud of as an athletic director. And came into it in 2008, and me and the old athletic director at Atwater, we looked at our stipend structure, and it didn't meet what was happening. Like it was written, it was tied to our teacher contract that was written 30 years ago, and it just didn't it wasn't a reality of what sports and coaching looked like in 2008, 2009. And so it's a lot of moving parts with, teacher union, district office personnel, and we just started attacking it and trying to come up with some solutions. And it took 7 years of back and forth with our union, with getting coaches on board, getting all the ads, and we finally cracked the stipend nut and got it across the finish line in 2015 was the first year. And the biggest thing in terms of like summer stipends was we approached it from a liability standpoint. Like in the old way, we would have anybody coaching our kids in the summer. They didn't have to be fingerprinted yet because football season hadn't started. our kids, by and large, didn't have to be cleared. They didn't have to have a physical because it was run through an AAU or it was run through a city organization. So we said, hey, we just want to make it a season. We want to make it like all of our kids are cleared. We know that they've been seen by a doctor. We want to make sure that every single coach who's going to be around our kid has passed fingerprints, have done all the 20 different certifications that are required to coach in our district at this point. And then in doing that, then we're going to compensate you too. We're going to give you a stipend, and it's not much, but like I said, it was something that we were always expecting our coaches to do. And I think if you're going to expect them, if you're going to expect your football program to run a comprehensive summer program, but you're not going to compensate them, I think that's hollow in terms of if you're going to expect it, then you should compensate them for it. So.
And being realistic, when we talk about compensation for education-based athletics, it's nothing to write home about. You might get gas money by the end of the year, but most of us are a net negative when we're doing this. But the thought and the idea of turning it into a season is pretty creative and resourceful, and it allows you to close some of the exposure holes that we all have anyway. So I love that idea. Let's go back in time now. When you took over as, it looks like, the co-head coach, number one, I'm curious about that arrangement. And then more importantly, what did you realize after your experience as an assistant and doing other things and feeling prepared that once you took over as the head coach, you realized right away that like you had to figure some things out?
Yeah, I was really fortunate with working with Lou Souza, and our other assistant coach was Keith Petiti. He'd also been a head coach at Las Banas, so we had really good mentorship there. And there really wasn't a whole lot of change in terms of my coaching duties. When I got there in '98, I was running the offense, and Coach Souza was doing all the pitching, and everybody had their thing. And then in transitioning to co-head coaches, it was more me being the face with parents, running those parent conferences. But in terms of the on field, it wasn't any change from being an assistant coach to being co-head coach to then taking over the program in 2003. So we like to think back. The reason we had so much success in that window is, one, we had really good players, but we had three guys that were basically working the hours of a head coach and putting in the time and running summer programs. And it was a cool spot to be in.
Yeah, no, that's a different setup than most of us have. When you became an AD, how would you answer that question, right? You've been, let's say, groomed for this over the years, being a head coach, multiple sports, being an assistant, multiple sports. You know how things work, but once you sit in that chair and move over a little bit, it's a completely different thing. What'd you realize right away in that shift, both at Merced and when you went back to Livingston, that, hey, I got to figure this thing out or it's going to eat me up?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it is just getting older and being a little bit more pragmatic in the approach. I think back to my first couple years as a varsity head coach, and also my first couple years as an athletic director, is like that movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's just nonstop, everything's coming at you. And I think part of maybe my I don't know if I was naive as an athletic director when I first took over, but there was this belief that because we had success in our baseball program, that a false belief that like all things in high school sports are equal. And if you just get the right coach, regardless of the sport, regardless of the area, anywhere in California, you can be successful. And I think a lot of that is, at the time, was me inflating, my coaching ability and our coaching staff's ability, because we did it, but age kicks in and hindsight, and you realize probably the best thing that we did as coaches is we just didn't mess up the the good players that we had. We let them be good, and yeah, it's amazing how good they make you look. And so I think that my approach as a coach, but also my approach as an athletic director, is really trying to communicate with our coaches how we're going to measure success, because there are certain things that, a good example, like we just went through a realignment process in our section, which that's a whole nother probably hour podcast about how we align schools in California. But we came from probably the toughest small school football league in California with the Trans Valley League. A couple years ago, Ripon and Escalon both won section championships, state championships. I think there was a span in 7 years where 5 of the 7 teams had won a state championship in that league. So just really good and tough. And our enrollment put us in that league, and there were a lot of games that we were just flat out outmatched, just based on, I don't know, just we don't have the horses at that point. True story. One of the first years in that league, our football booster club was giving frozen chicken breast to our starting quarterback, who was 5'5", 130 pounds, because we wanted to make sure he had protein. And While other schools in our league where parents were paying for their kids' strength and conditioning coach, we're playing football on Saturday and we're having a car wash so we can buy protein for our kids Saturday morning. Our football program was going to try to measure our success by the number of league championships we're going to win in the TVL. That's going to be an uphill battle. Again, education-based athletics. We're not going to go pick up a new quarterback halfway through the year from Fresno because it's not a travel team. I don't know. It's tough, man. I think you you're not lowering the standard to say, hey, we don't want to be competitive, but you've also got to be realistic with whatever league you're in and how you're competing with the schools that you're competing against.
I don't think it's lowering the standard as much as taking a beat and redefining what success looks like, right? Your analogy in football is similar to anyone around here who has to play golf with us. It's like you're not winning a league championship. Sorry,
Yeah.
you're probably not winning a section title. So success metric is, can you finish second?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's lowering your standard as much as what's the pool you're swimming in. And it's like ultimately everybody's got to take a step back and look at that. Like you said about when you were really good in baseball, you had really good players, and
Yeah.
sometimes those kids aren't there anymore.
Yeah.
What would you say is the best thing you do holistically in your program? And I'd love to know if there's something that you brought with you from Merced that was like, hey, this was super transformational over here. And look, I'm a Livingston guy, grew up here, but I'm bringing this with me because it has such a ripple effect on the way in which people see themselves and the energy and the culture that exists within the school.
Yeah. I think just being mentored by two really good coaches at Merced, those lessons stay with me as I talk to some of our newer coaches. How they communicate with their kids. I think probably one of the best things we do, like as not only just a site, but just kind of our approach as a district and what defines maybe the culture in Merced Union High School District athletics is that we're like really all in on trying to give our kids as many opportunities as possible. And that was reflected in our district redoing stipends, providing summer stipends. Our superintendent gets it. He understands that when kids are involved in school, they show up more. When they show up more, there's less discipline entries. When they show up and they're not getting in trouble, they graduate at a higher rate. And so, like the idea of some schools struggling with athletic transportation, our district gets it. If they invest in athletic transportation and they're paying for the band to go to a band review, that's like pennies on the dollar in terms of graduation rates and just creating a culture at school that kids want to be there. So, like flag football 2 years ago was a good example of. I think I'm having a fire alarm. Flag football, we like jumped in full go 2 years ago. We found out, I think, in late April, early May, that we were going to have the opportunity to play flag football in August of 2023. And we just said, okay, we're going to do it. And bought uniforms, got equipment, got stipends, and all six of our schools in our district had JV and varsity. And we just had an unbelievable experience with that. Just an example of our district just saying, okay, if it's going to get kids involved, then we're going to find a way to pay for it. So we're pretty good at that right now.
And in regards to the Livingston being a smaller school, Merced's a little bit bigger school, and you as a three-sport athlete, your children as three-sport athletes, how have you found success encouraging, mandating, however you do that, in regards to keeping these kids out of the sports specialization ball fake, right? Talk a little bit about your strategy there, because as a smaller school like us, right, we need all of our kids to play multiple sports. But some, like the bigger schools now, have drank this Kool-Aid on sports specialization, unfortunately. How do you keep that alive at your site?
Yeah, we're the same way. Our enrollment's a little over 1,100. I think we're like 1,127. And I think the biggest thing is having your coaching colleagues, that you trust your coaching colleagues. Like I know our baseball coach and our football coach, they have lunch together every day. I know that our football coach is not going to tell a football guy, hey, you can't go play baseball. And our baseball coach is going to do the same thing for our football team. Hey, you need to go. He's coaching girls golf in the fall. He doesn't want to see them in the fall. He wants them to be doing something. Go run cross country if you're a pitcher. Go. So I know we have that. We have a culture that we're going to share athletes, and not just share, but we're going to actively encourage our kids to be involved in other sports. And I think a big part of that is just the trust that they're not just going to say it. They're going to follow through, and they're going to make sure that those kids are given that opportunity. And I even approach it more even from a coaching standpoint. Like I want our coaches to coach more than one sport, and being the head varsity basketball coach and then being an assistant flag football coach and having a chance to work with someone who's really talented in flag football, and how that experience will improve their ability to communicate with kids in their sport of choice, I think is really important. I think as a player, I think there's tremendous value in having your favorite sport, but then also, being a role player. Like I was football, I was okay. Baseball was my thing. Basketball's all right, but there's tremendous value being like one of the best players on the baseball roster and then being the last guy on the bench in basketball, and understanding how that's going to make me a better leader on the baseball field, having empathy for the guy on the bench and knowing what they're going through. I try to communicate that with our kids and our coaches. And again, like we're not an affluent community. We don't have a ton of kids who have the ability to go out and play really high level competitive travel sports.
Yeah, I feel like I'm constantly fighting the outside noise in regards to what we know to be true versus what is being sold. And especially with the transfer portal, with the house settlement, with all these things that are restricting opportunities, it's how are we constantly messaging against the machine and helping kids understand and parents understand the value add of doing exactly what you just said, which is being a role player in multiple different sports so you understand what that feels like because that's what life's like.
Yeah, 100%. I don't. I challenge anybody that says they're going to be an NBA All Star, and the reality is, with 2% or 3% are going to go on and play in college, and the value of your high school experience of being a part of multiple programs and being on 3 teams a year. I just think that I wouldn't trade. I did it. I wouldn't trade it for the world. You sure there are some times where you win, and that's gonna be a positive when you think back about whatever team you're on, but you remember the team more than the games and the individual championships and things like that. And yeah, I 100%, I'm on board with that.
Do you have, as an athletic department, some sort of acknowledgement for kids that have played 3 sports for all 4 years they've been at the school?
We give them a lifetime pass. So at their senior year, our spring sports award ceremony, we give them a gold card that they and a guest can come to any athletic event for as long as they, so as long as they, until they lose that card,
And
basically.
and how many of those do you have each year? And the reason I'm asking is we've got the we've got a school in the northern part of our section which has 2,500 students, and they hadn't had what we call an Iron Pirate since 2015. We had 8 last year. We had 7 the year before, right? We're going to have probably 12 this year. How many do you have each year?
We're anywhere from, I would say, two to six, but
Okay.
yeah, it's something that I think they're aware of now because as underclassmen, they see these cards being given out. And actually, I'm trying to think, we've done it at graduation at times too, where they'll like graduation practice, the principal will call them up in front of their class and give them their lifetime pass. So yeah, it was when we went through COVID, it was a little bit janky in that the way we did COVID, we had multiple sports going on at the same time. Then we got back to the traditional calendars, and but for the most part, we have a handful every year.
Cool. Love that. What would you say, or what could you share that has been transferable between your multiple coaching hats, right? So you mentioned your time abroad teaching beginners, right? And having beginners mind again. But then you were the girls golf coach, right? You were the JV football coach, you were the baseball coach. What would you say specifically transferred from each of those that most people wouldn't think had transferability? I'm often in the same boat with our adults trying to get them to watch like other sports to get ideas for their own teams.
Yeah, I think you learn so much from coaching and playing in different programs. Again, trying to get our coaches to coach other outside their comfort zone. And I mentioned that earlier, getting when I was at Merced High, getting Marcus Knott to agree to coach JV football. He never played football, never coached football. I think he watched the NFL as a Raider fan. That's the extent of his football. But it's that idea of, hey, man, I know you're good with kids. And I know that I'm going to tell you what you need to know a couple days before the kids need to know it. So just stay a couple days ahead of the kids. And we had a fun staff. And I think he ended up coaching for 2 or 3 years before he took over as the head basketball coach. But I think that like when you watch other teams, I think the more you watch, I think the more you can identify like what coaches actually get it and maybe what coaches or what programs are faking it. And I think the more you watch, the more you can get in tune with that. I love watching a coach when like they don't get a call or they drop a play and it doesn't work. And you just watch sometimes it's a millisecond, sometimes it's a minute, but how quickly they can either have the discipline to get back on track to give their team exactly what they need, or how much or how long they're going to spend sidetracked in terms of something that they can't control. A football coach that gets a bad call, calls a timeout, and goes out and argues with the white hat for the full timeout. White hat puts the ball back in play, and they got 13 guys in the huddle. What are we doing? But just teachable moments that I think I can think back to when I was playing and like 15, 16 years old playing American Legion and like playing against Lou Souza, Scotty Haig coach team and not knowing what it was, but knowing that those guys had it. And not only did those guys have it, but that team was like they were buying what those coaches were selling because the way they played, the way they prepared. It's like those certain coaches that I don't know, they said it about, I think it was like Bear Bryant, like he could beat you with his team and then he'll take your roster and give him a week with your roster and he'll beat you with your roster too. Like they have that, I don't know, they have that ability to connect. And fortunate in like my coaching career, having a chance to work with Lou Souza, being in that program and seeing how you teach kids to show up to practice, how you, as a pitching coach, he would teach how you warm up as a baseball pitcher and just the little minute routine that you're going to do every single day and how that correlates to being able to execute a 2-0 changeup to a 4 hitter with the game on the line to get him to roll over. And you're playing practice, you're harping on those little things to make it just so routine that they don't even think about it, that they can just execute it like flawlessly in a game. How to execute in the clutch, in a real pressurized situation, just getting to a point where you can just relax and let your ability just take over. You don't have to play faster in big games, those types of things. All those teachable moments, I think they add up to that what is it and how you communicate it with your kids and with your coaching staff.
For sure. What would you say as a baseball coach to the baseball people listening? What can you offer in regards to one of those routine practices and that they could steal and apply to their own pitching staff, hitting, whatever? What does that look like specifically?
The thing, I think if you just go out as an athletic director and you don't know anything about baseball, maybe you know a little bit, but you go out and watch a practice, you watch the first maybe 15 minutes of practice and what happens when, okay, maybe you do some sort of dynamic stretch. And then usually the first thing they do is everybody goes and plays catch. Like, what are the coaches doing when the players are playing catch? You go to a baseball practice and see 4 coaches in the dugout talking about what they had for dinner last night or what they watched on TV, or maybe they're still prepping the field. Or you watch a program where every single coach is out with their position when they're playing catch, like coaching and teaching and watching their feet, making sure that they're doing exactly what you said. I mean, there's only a few things that you do in baseball. You throw, you catch, you hit, you run. And one of those things is catch and throw. And you're not warming up just to get loose. You're warming up to practice a skill and coaches need to coach it. And that, I don't know, that's just one of those things that if I go watch a baseball practice, that's, hey, get out there and coach, man. It's not time to catch up with your coaching buddies.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's so simple when you
Yeah.
think about it, right? Because often, even just as a basketball coach, it's how are we deploying our assistants to get the maximum return on investment versus, oh, everybody's here in the middle talking to each other. No, get to the basket, figure out how to give some feedback loops. And I think that's just a great takeaway in general. As the athletic director, either at the district level or the site level, what would you say is the best tool you have adopted recently that's made your life easier?
We went to athletic clearance on home campus like I think 5 or 6 summers ago, and just getting rid of the actual hard copies that we would give to our coaches for clearances and going digital. That's been a game changer, I think, across our district. We would have kids out the door the first day of practice trying to get cleared for practice. And now as we transition to have all of our kids and coaches get cleared in the summer, so we're getting everybody cleared June 1st, and then they're pretty much cleared for the whole year. So that transition from season to season using home campus that's been awesome for us.
So we're in this age demographic where we're Gen Xers and we are in this born in the 70s, And we're not yet like the old guard at the school, but we're also not the young kids anymore. How have you found our, let's call it chronological or age positionality in that space, right? Especially in the school politics and when you come in and at the faculty room, whatever it happens to be, you know what I'm talking about. And other people that are education based know what I'm talking about. How have you figured out how to be a better politician and navigate some of those things as you have moved into more middle management opportunities, right? So you went from coaching to athletic administration to now you're working at the district level, and each of those hats is slightly different. But big picture, it's like, what do you have to offer people that are in that transitional area of going into these spaces where things are a little different and you got to know how to navigate the waters?
I would say that the two kind of broad umbrellas under that, maybe that question is you have to be able to build relationship capital. And you know it, and you hear it all the time, but you absolutely can't burn bridges. You've got to be able to find a way to have a professional relationship with the people that you're working with, regardless of what's happening. In 16 years as an athletic director, both at Merced and Livingston, the structure in terms of how they organize it in our district is there's an associate principal who oversees athletics. So in 16 years, I've had 12 different associate principals overseeing athletics and 7 different principals. And so I think of the 7 different principals, 5 have gone on to senior leadership positions at our district office. And so that the takeaway is, one, you better get used to change. And two, not only find a way to build, but find a way to sustain those professional relationships, because the people who are moving up, those are the same people that you're going to need to call. You pick your spots, but I know if I call this person, they're probably going to pick up the phone because we had a great relationship working at Merced, or we had a great relationship when that person was a principal at Livingston. And the other thing, it's hard when I think when you're young getting into the profession, but I think you have to slow down, play the long game. I think the first couple of years as a baseball coach at Merced, I had no idea why we couldn't practice 24/7. Well, why can't we do that? I didn't understand the CIF. I didn't understand the Sac Joaquin section. I bitched and complained to our AD at the time, who was Vince Clemens, legendary basketball coach, and he'd print out the bylaws and put them in my box, and that would pacify me for a week or so. And I don't think I've changed a whole lot, but I know just being older, you're a lot more pragmatic, and you instead of just bitching about the process, you say, okay, how do we change the process? Okay, it's a complicated problem with a lot of moving parts, but if I'm going to be in it for another 10 years, I got 10 years to figure out this next challenge, and you just chip away at it.
For sure. And well, what you mentioned earlier, it took you 7 years to address the summer stipend issue, right? So
Yeah.
take the long approach, figure out how you're working with people and not against them. I think the wisdom you just shared in regards to the number of supervisors you've had that have moved up to the district level, it's not like they just go away. So you don't necessarily get along with someone. That's great in the short term, but in the long term, you're probably hurting kids.
Yeah. Those are the same people that are making decisions on how they fund athletics or what we're going to do with our athletic facilities. And again, like, that's to the credit of our district office and the people who are making those decisions. They want to make sure that a kid who is in our district has a consistent experience in athletics, whether they go to Merced High or they go to Livingston. And there's a standard for, hey, we're going to have an all-weather track that you're going to run on. There's a standard that we're going to have this type of pool to play water polo and swim. And I think they've moved in that direction to make it so there's not a kid at Atwater that says, if I'm going to be a football player, I have to go to Merced. Merced's had a good program, but in terms of facilities and the athletic experience, it shouldn't be the haves and have-nots within a district.
No doubt. And how would you describe, let's call it a win you've had in that space, either at Merced or at Livingston, beyond summer stipends for coaches, where there was a transformational shift that was necessary to keep the kids at the center of the equation that you had to go to bat for either independently or with your fellow athletic directors and coaches?
I think every year I wouldn't say there's massive battles, but there's micro battles all the time fighting. We had a new football coach is in his 3rd year, and he really wanted to run a morning weightlifting class and kind of give up his afternoon coaching assignment. And so that was something that, as a first year varsity head coach, I wanted to make sure that I was supporting him in that. Our previous coach had tried to do the same thing, and we couldn't get it across the finish line. And then fighting for that section, we have athletics at the end of our school day. So basically, most of our coaches are basically teaching their class at the end of the school day, their sport.
Like athletic PE.
Yeah, athletic PE. Yeah. And so every year when our school gets our sections, we're always needing one or two more of those and trying to go to bat for not only our coaches but our kids, and presenting that fact like, okay, if we don't have this one, then this is the solution that we have to move kids around, and this is what we have to live with. If that is what it is, then that's a challenge. So I would say those are ongoing every year. I don't want to say it's a battle, but you got to be able to communicate what's best for kids, and hopefully they'll figure out a way that they can fund it.
Yeah, it's always a challenge. Like you said, micro battles. I like that term. Let me wrap with this. What is something that you have most recently changed your mind on, either in your professional space, your personal life, but something where you used to have this opinion and you were pretty dug in about it, and through whatever act of God or research or whatever, or time,
Yeah.
you're over here and here's why.
I hate the idea of running for punishment now. I will say we didn't run a ton for punishment when I was a head coach, but we did it. And I just think now, if you have a guy that misses a tackle, then teach him how to tackle, or if he can't tackle, find somebody that can. If a kid's out of shape, then condition them because they need to be in shape. But if you're talking about running because of some discipline issue, address the discipline issue, address the team rules violation. I was watching, we had like freshman girls volleyball, and our opponent ball dropped in the back row, and the coach called timeout, and they just ran the whole timeout. What are we doing? Like, whose ball was it? What are we coaching here? So I would probably say that's one. The other one, and my wife would probably kill me for saying it, but after a game, keep the post game talk to 5 minutes. And I was probably as guilty as everybody else, just trying to go on and on. And after the game, kids just want to thank them for their effort and send them home and let them go get a juice box. And I don't know, I've presented that to our coaches. I send out like a weekly email, like a 3 things email, like, hey, 3 to remember, 3 to think about, or 3 to celebrate. And that's one of them. It's in your post game talk, is what you're telling your kids. Is it benefiting you, or is it directly going to benefit them? And if it's going to directly benefit them, then save it for practice the next time, because that's when they're going to be ready to hear, hey, this is what we did wrong, and now we're going to go out and fix it. And I just think that post game half-hour diatribe where every coach gets 10 or 15 minutes, it ends up clouding the message and kind of messing up the narrative of the season. And I think just acts it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And again, the research will support us in that. We do it even more simply. It's go, and that when I say we, like my team and the football team now and the other teams that I've coached now, it's walk in, clap. All right, what celebrations do we have? And each of I celebrate so and so for doing this. Okay, great. See you tomorrow.
That's awesome.
You leave it on positive, even if you get trounced. It's, hey, what can we point out that went well that we could celebrate? And then, like you said, come back the next day if you have it. Because how many times have you thought one thing and then you go watch the film and it's, oh, shoot, I got to unwind that thing I said?
100%. I think it's incredibly valuable to meet as a coaching staff, watch the film, make sure that your perception of the game live matches what on film, make sure that your perception of individual roles and performances and stats, that I think it takes time to digest that, and then to create a narrative, like a practice plan narrative for the next practice, to, okay, here's where we have to go. This is what we have. This is the most important thing that we have to do, and then do it, as opposed to being able to do that on the fly 5 minutes after a game. I don't think that's doable.
Not at all. But what, like you said, generally that's for us to deal with our frustration and not for the kids. So hopefully we can all graduate from that mindset.
Right.
And in the meantime, Coach, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you.